Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Netflix miniseries, Hollywood.
hmm
And this one is especially interesting because we are not going to be talking about the show itself,
Right.
but rather diving into the show's own Wikipedia page and seeing what interesting facts and connections to the real world we can find.
Yeah. It's really interesting how this miniseries blends real Hollywood history
Right.
with a good dose of what if.
Yeah, for sure. So for anyone who hasn't had the chance to see it yet, what would you say is like the basic premise behind this show, Hollywood?
So imagine a post-World War II Hollywood,
Okay.
but with all the usual power dynamics kind of flipped on their head.
Interesting.
The show follows this group of aspiring actors and filmmakers,
Mm.
all trying to make it big, but in this reimagined industry where racism and homophobia have basically been eradicated.
Wow. So almost like an alternate reality, kind of.
Exactly. Like Hollywood becomes this beacon of diversity and inclusion
Yeah.
way earlier than it actually happened.
Way before it should have happened.
Exactly. And to tell this story, they've put together a really impressive cast.
Yeah.
Big names like David Corenswet, Darren Criss, Laura Harrier,
Hmm.
even Jim Parsons and Patti LuPone.
Wow.
Each playing characters kind of navigating this new Hollywood landscape.
Yeah. I remember seeing the trailers, and it was definitely like a star-studded
Oh, for sure.
affair.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned this alternate reality, but they do also include some real historical figures in there as well, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting. You see characters like Anna May Wong, who in real life
Right.
faced tons of discrimination as a Chinese-American actress.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Hattie McDaniel, the first Black actress to win an Oscar. But in the show, their stories are different
Okay.
in this much more inclusive environment.
So it's almost like they're giving these figures a chance to kind of
Right.
shine in a way they maybe couldn't have in the real world.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to ask about something that really caught my eye when I was reading about this show. Dylan McDermott's character, Ernie West.
Ah, yes. The character based on Scotty Bowers.
Oh, wow. The real-life Hollywood fixer.
Yeah.
That's a pretty interesting choice to include in a show like this.
It definitely adds another layer to the story. You know, on the
Yeah.
one hand, you have this narrative about a more inclusive Hollywood, but then you have a character like Ernie,
Right.
who represents like this darker side of the industry.
Yeah. So a lot of contrasts at play.
Yeah, definitely this idealized Hollywood versus like the messy reality.
Right.
And that's kind of where the mixed critical reception comes into play.
Oh, okay.
Some people loved it, praised the show for its ambition and trying to reimagine history.
Yeah.
But others criticized it for maybe oversimplifying things
Right.
and kind of glossing over the real struggles people went through.
So some saw it as like a Hollywood fairy tale,
Yeah,
and others thought it was kind of an oversimplification of
right.
the nuances of history.
Exactly. And it definitely sparked debate.
Yeah.
The question of whether it's okay to rewrite history for entertainment
Yeah, for sure.
is a tough one, and Hollywood landed right in the middle of it.
Right in the thick of it. And
Yeah.
to add on to that, didn't this show get a ton of Emmy nominations?
It did 12 nominations.
Wow.
And it even won a couple, especially in categories like hairstyling and music.
So they really nailed the aesthetic.
Absolutely visually stunning. But I wonder if that also contributed to some of the criticism.
Okay.
You know, style over substance.
Yeah, did the glossiness distract from some of the problems that people saw?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this mini-series with an amazing cast, big names, tackles huge issues, but it does it by changing history. Where do we go from here?
I think that's what this deep dive is really all about, exploring those questions. Does Hollywood trivialize things or offer a valuable message of hope?
Yeah,
And what does it mean to rewrite history, even if it's with good intentions?
yeah, for sure. So let's dive in.
Yeah, it's a tough thing, isn't it, to tell a captivating story while still respecting the complexities of history?
Absolutely, and it makes you wonder if they had gone with a more realistic portrayal of, like the struggles that Hollywood had with racism and homophobia.
Mm-hmm.
Would it have even had the same impact as many people have even seen it?
It's hard to say, really. I mean, on the one hand, a more realistic approach might have been praised for its authenticity, you know, like being more true to the real stories.
Right.
But it might have also been less appealing to a wider audience.
Yeah, it's like this version of Hollywood
Yeah.
almost presents like a utopia, like a perfect world
Right.
where talent always wins out no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But by doing that, does it kind of downplay the real pain that people actually experienced?
I think that's a valid point. Some argue that this kind of revisionist history, even if it's well-intentioned, can end up distorting how we understand the past.
It's almost like saying, oh, it could have been this easy.
Right.
When in reality, the fight for equality was and still is a really tough battle.
And the show doesn't completely ignore that. Even in this idealized Hollywood, there are still characters who face prejudice, like Camille Washington.
Oh, right. The aspiring black actress played by Laura Harrier.
Exactly. Even though she gets a leading role in this groundbreaking film, she still has to deal with a ton of backlash and threats.
So it's a reminder that even in this fictional progressive world, change doesn't just magically happen overnight.
Precisely. And that's where I think the show tries to find a balance, showing this optimistic vision of what could have been, but also acknowledging that prejudice wouldn't have just disappeared.
So it's like a best case scenario, but still grounded in some kind of reality.
Exactly. They're saying this is a world where things are better, but the fight's not over.
Yeah, it's not a finished story.
Right. And I think that's what makes Hollywood so interesting. It uses this fictional story to spark a conversation about things like representation, the kinds of stories we tell,
Right.
and the responsibility we have to learn from history.
Even as we play with the what-ifs.
Exactly. And these conversations aren't limited to just Hollywood, are they?
No, not at all. I mean, the themes of the show are way bigger than just the entertainment industry.
Right. The struggle for equality, the fight against discrimination, these are universal.
Absolutely. So by exploring these issues within the world of Hollywood, Hollywood is actually touching on things that are still happening in the world today.
For sure. It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line.
Yeah.
And the fight for equality never really ends.
It's constantly evolving. It's kind of like they're saying, hey, here's this hopeful vision,
Yeah.
but don't get too comfortable. Like you can't just expect things to fix themselves.
Yeah. It's definitely a call to action. It makes you think about the media you take in, the stories that shape how we see the world and the systems that keep inequality going.
So for someone listening to this who's maybe intrigued by this whole idea of a reimagined Hollywood, what would you say is the main takeaway?
I think it really comes down to the power of stories. Hollywood shows how stories can change how we think, challenge what we believe, and inspire us to imagine a different future.
Even though it's messing with history, it still makes you ask important questions about who gets to tell their story and whose voices are heard the loudest.
It reminds us that history isn't fixed. It's a bunch of different stories, often told by whoever's in charge.
Right.
And it's our job to look at those stories, question them, and find different perspectives.
So Hollywood is giving us permission to dream a little bit. Imagine a world where things could be different.
Right.
But it's not letting us forget about the work that needs to be done to get there.
And it celebrates the people who fight for their dreams, no matter, the characters in Hollywood. They show us that change is possible, even if it takes a long time.
Definitely. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive into Hollywood, I'm curious, does this whole optimistic revisionism thing ultimately empower us, or does it kind of distract us from the real struggles of the past?
I think that's the question we want to leave you with. Does Hollywood offer a valuable message of hope? Or does it maybe make light of the real issues people faced and are still facing today?
It's definitely something to think about. We encourage you to keep discussing these ideas and use your own voice to advocate for a better world, both inside and outside of the entertainment industry. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.